Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
Live from New York, this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, will Google be forced to sell off its Chrome browser? We discuss the latest in the historic Alphabet antitrust fight here in the United States. Plus, Roblox enhances parental controls following criticism over child protection on its platform. We sit down with the company's chief safety officer. And SpaceX readies for another Starship launch with President-elect Donald Trump set to attend. But first, we check in on these markets. Despite the geopolitical headwinds, Russia, Ukraine, we push higher just about on 0.1%, let's call it, on the NASDAQ 100, higher still on the NASDAQ. That's 2 straight days of gains when you're looking at big tech. And that more broadly is as we shake off what had been a big points drag on the day, which was Alphabet. Let's just go into the intricacies of what's happening with Google at the moment in terms of its price point, because we started off the day trading lower. Anxiety around the building antitrust crescendo around this particular company. And then maybe we push into the green, up 0.4%. Is there a slight relief rally that it's not being forced to sell off Android? We get into it now with Bloomberg's Michael Shepard in Washington, because it's an interesting stock market reaction here. Michael, many would say, look, the clouds of antitrust concerns still sit on the valuation of Google, but get into what we are learning in terms of the DOJ looking to treat an antitrust issue from their perspective.
Well, first, credit to our colleagues Leah Nyland and Josh Sisko for breaking the news about what the Justice Department and state antitrust regulators are thinking about asking a judge in the way of remedies in this historic case. This dates to the August ruling in which a judge here in Washington found that Google had illegally monopolized the market for search globally. And now they are looking for how to make this right for consumers and for website operators around the world. The one step, of course, being considered is forcing them to sell off Chrome, the browser. It's one of the world's most widely used browsers. But other measures being considered also include requiring the company to license its search results and data, and then also giving websites the option of opting out of having their content used to help Google build its artificial intelligence platforms.
Once again, Google, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, speaks out saying these are sort of radical steps being taken by the US government and sort of weighting down, putting their thumb on the scale is how Google has been articulating it. But more broadly, the intricacies around selling off data, about sharing data, is a tough one. Many in the market say, look, this is going to take years to enforce. You're going to see an appeals process. But more broadly, you're also going to potentially see other remedies come into light that Google could action first, perhaps April and August. What do we think Alphabet's own reaction will be?
This will play out over a long time, and I'm glad you brought that up, Caroline, in terms of the clock here. The judge has set a 2-week hearing in April to actually walk through some of the potential remedies that the DOJ and antitrust regulators at the state level are offering, and that will give time to the company to think about, okay, what could we offer perhaps as a settlement? What else can we do? What is maybe a middle ground that could satisfy some of the concerns being raised by government authorities? Likewise, the judge himself is not expected to rule until August 2025. That is almost a year from his original ruling. And then after that, we'll go through an appeals process. And given the stakes for Alphabet in this case, they are likely to take this appeal all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court eventually.
Because this would have a major business impact. The way in which they can see who I am when I use Chrome, which has, I think, about 60% of the market from a browser perspective, and then go across to use the search function within it. That's about 90% of the market, and all the data therein, and they can target me better with ads. This would be a big business model change, and ultimately many out there are wondering who on earth would even buy Chrome if it was forced.
Well, it's a great question again on who would buy Chrome, because the price for it would preclude many from even trying to pick it up. And the few buyers out there with the resources to pull it off, perhaps Amazon.com Inc. or even OpenAI, an attempt by them to purchase this could also raise separate antitrust questions that the government may be eager to avoid. Likewise, as you pointed out, this is central to Alphabet's business. They use that user data, as you pointed out, to target advertising and promotions better. And they're also using it, as I mentioned before, to try to craft a better version of this Gemini AI platform that they're developing. And we saw it in their most recent results. They really pointed to search as something that is driving this bet on AI, and they really would like to keep this going if they can.
AI overviews, all anyone sees now when they're typing in for search. Michael Shepard, we so appreciate the breakdown from Washington for broader tech market perspective and indeed, well, what the legal realities are here. Sarah Lamb is a senior fellow at the Tech Institute. And Sarah, I mean, just put your thumb on the scales here as Google is pushing back on the government for so doing. Do you think this has any chance of getting through, that something as seismic as Chrome being sold off would happen?
I think personally it's unlikely. It was unchallenged conduct in the decision. So if you go back and read the 286-page decision from August 5th, there is
Thanks
a discussion.
for doing that for us, because we don't have the time.
There's discussion about the contracts and the preloading of the Google suite, and a little bit on the Chrome browser. But unchallenged conduct was the search bar in the Chrome window. And so that wasn't challenged at trial. And so, you know, there would have to be fact-finding and a discussion of the browser market in the April hearing. Like the prior speaker said, August 2025 is when a decision will come out on remedies. And also of note, Google has an opportunity to submit their proposed remedies December 20th. So it really is an ongoing process. The last two big cases, Microsoft and AT&T, took nearly a decade to resolve.
And Microsoft appealed successfully, AT&T less so. Sarah, do you therefore think some other changes could be made to fight the idea that Google is monopoly or monopolistic in search? What could Google enact here itself?
Well, I think at issue are the contracts. So the way they contract with Samsung or the other OEM providers, that could change. But even so, there's so much dynamism in the market. Samsung uploads its own S browser, and I, read that in the decision. Other Android platforms, they have their own browsers. And so I think right now the market is so dynamic too, with AI search windows, that, the way Google responds will have to reflect what's happening in the AI market.
Let's just talk about AI and the data that maybe they'd be forced to license in some way. Would that be positive or negative for the rest of the market, not just Google?
Right. I think operationally that would be very difficult to work through. So that would also be a years-long process. I don't know how great lawyers are at product design. So to the extent that, there is some talk that there might have FRAND, F-R-A-N-D licensing terms in the proposed remedies. And that is something that is familiar in the intellectual property and standards development world. But to the level of data sharing and, opening that pipeline of AI data, that would be a very new type of remedy.
Look, we can see from the share price that the market isn't freaking out about this, but there does seem to be a cloud over Google for the next few years, maybe even decade, as you were saying, Sarah. What about an administration change in 2025? Does that bear any thought for you?
Yes, what's interesting, though, is the first Trump administration brought the suit. So you have that, although Assistant AG Macon Delrahim recused himself. So this case has a long history so far. You hear kind of murmurs about the next administration wanting to continue activity, but at the same time, they seem to be more pro innovation and technology. So we'll see what whoever is Attorney General and then Assistant Attorney General, at least inside the Beltway, we're all kind of guessing who it could be, but who knows yet.
Sarah Olam, Senior Fellow at Tech Institute. We appreciate the time and analysis. Meanwhile, well, talking of regulatory landscape in the UK, Google's partnership with the AI firm Anthropic has actually avoided further scrutiny after the UK antitrust watchdog concluded it doesn't qualify for a full-blown investigation under merger rules. The CMA found that Google has not gained, quote, material influence over Anthropic as a result of the deal, which included a $2 billion investment and a cloud agreement. Coming up, scaling safe AI governance. We're going to be joined by Credo AI CEO, that's Navrina Singh, on a new partnership with Microsoft. This is Bloomberg Technology. Microsoft, it wants to make it easier to switch between large language models with its new tool, Azure AI Foundry, which can help cloud customers build and deploy AI applications. Now, the company is giving away the software in the hopes of persuading corporate customers to buy more of its cloud services. Bloomberg's Dina Bass has more on what is being unveiled at the annual event in Chicago, Ignite, Dina. And really, the underlying process here is what? What is the blocker here? People don't feel they can flip from one great model to another?
The whole product is meant to help make it easier to get your models programmed up, running, deployed. But one of the biggest blockers is that, we're seeing this constant drumbeat of new models coming out, whether it's OpenAI updating their models. And, one of them is better for reasoning. One of them is better for answering questions that are more conversational. And then there are, numerous competitors. Microsoft has, 1,700, 1,800 different models that are available through this Azure service. And so the issue is, how do you figure out which is the right one, and how do you switch if there's an update or you want to try something different? So this Foundry software basically has a bunch of different tools that allow you to experiment with different models, see which one works better, switch more easily, track what's working and what isn't. So for example, if you want to put your own corporate data into someone else's model in order to fine tune it, and you want to know, is that data really making a difference? Is it making the answers better or worse? Things like that are really hard to test right now. And it's imperative for Microsoft to make this easier in order to convince people to spend more money on Azure services to build and deploy these AI applications.
And they want people to spend more money because they're having to spend a lot of money, invest certainly on chips, for example. They're building their own. They're also showing off how NVIDIA's new AI chips are going to be working within the systems. Can you talk us through their own offering?
Sure. So a year ago at this same conference, they announced their first AI chip. And today they've said that it is now handling customer workloads in the Azure OpenAI service. They also announced two new chips today. One of them is for security. It's going to go in Microsoft's own data center servers to better secure them. And one of them is a data processing unit, which is basically a networking chip that takes a bunch of the data crunching off of the other chips in order to make things faster. So they're now increasingly getting into a position that Amazon Web Services has been in for a while, of really coming up with a bunch of their own chips for different types of tasks and things inside the data center in order to make sure that Microsoft can do a much better job of training AI, inferencing, serving applications, and a bunch of other things that you would use Microsoft Cloud for. They obviously still work very closely with NVIDIA. It's going to take a very long time, if ever, for Azure to be able to replace NVIDIA in its data center, even if they're putting some of the AI traffic onto this Azure Maya AI chip. But at the same time, they, I spoke to Ronnie Borkar, their head of chip design and development, and, she made the point that everything needs to be optimized at every layer in order to get the best possible performance because models are growing so rapidly.
Dina Bass, all things Microsoft, we thank you. For more on what's coming out of Microsoft and AI, we have Credo AI announcing they are partnering with the tech giant to power end-to-end AI governance for enterprise applications, which will help companies basically safely adopt these cutting-edge AI solutions, while also ensuring that compliance is there with global regulations. Navrina Singh joins us, CEO of Credo AI. And look, how much of a blocker is the cloud around governance of AI?
Caroline, great to be here today. One of the things that we have found that there is a massive gap between innovative AI solutions and actually practical business applications. And the only way to accelerate that gap and bring AI innovations to it is through AI governance. So this is where we are very excited to announce our partnership today with Microsoft Azure AI Foundry. And Credo AI, as you know, is the leading provider of AI governance solutions. So I do want to just emphasize the three things that this partnership is going to bring to life. One is end-to-end governance of Azure AI apps, including generative AI multimodal systems, as well as RAG-based use cases. Secondly is this comprehensive unified control that Dina was just talking about, which is needed for both the AI developers and governance leaders. And lastly, the support for governing, especially these cutting edge systems that are really getting, brought to life each and every day, like GPT-4, GPT-4o, and smaller 5 models. So Credo AI is excited to partner with Microsoft to bring all these capabilities at scale through an independent governance layer.
Just talk us through that governance layer. What is the technology that enables you to be monitoring consistently, to ensuring that these models are doing what they say they're doing and doing them, well, with fair use case and ultimately no bias, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So Caroline, one of the core things that we are finding with accelerating AI transformation and innovation is something called as AI alignment. How do you actually ensure that you're measuring the health of these AI systems against the policies, the principles, the regulations, AI standards that you as a company deeply care about? So this is where Credo AI's pioneering solution in policy intelligence makes that really easy for your business experts as well as your AI experts to align on what that good looks like. And once you've aligned on what that good looks like, really measuring your AI systems, your models, your data sets against those requirements. And then lastly, really putting that out in a continuous monitoring, risk management, and compliance engine so that you can make sure that you're always in alignment. And as you can imagine, Caroline, this becomes really critical with the AI agents and agentic systems that have started to take a lot of excitement in business organizations.
Microsoft talking a lot about AI agents today, Navrina. Look, the real world impact is that we hear that people are actually kind of plateauing in their own use, employees' use of agents, AI, generative AI in the workplace, largely because they're worried that they could be deemed lazy or they don't really understand what the guardrails are from those that are above them. Is management on top of this?
The reason for the AI plateau is because most of the organizations, more than 70% of them, don't have guardrails in place. And this is where Credo AI-like solutions become really critical because we are converting, governance from a safety net to really being a launch pad for AI innovations. So what we are finding in the companies that we work with, whether it is MasterCard, Regeneron, Booz Allen, and others, is that when you have the clearly defined guardrails, employees actually are much more excited to use these technologies at scale. So with governance, what we are going to see is much more excited as well as rampant use of artificial intelligence and AI transformation within organizations.
Do you think any of that regulatory outlook, governance designs and desires is going to change under the next administration in the US?
One of the exciting things is that AI is actually central and core to the strategy, irrespective of the administration. We are ready to actually engage with the new administration, who is really looking at AI innovation much more holistically. So more to come on that. But right now, I think there's a lot of excitement on how do you actually use AI for transforming government as well as AI for making sure United States competitiveness in the world continues to stay at forefront.
Navrina Singh, Credo AI CEO on a new partnership with Microsoft. We appreciate you joining. Thank you. Let's check in on the shares of Supermicro, jumping after the company hired a new auditor, filed a plan to come into compliance with the NASDAQ listing requirements. Bloomberg's Brody Ford joins us for more. We're up 33%, but we are still way off of our highs from when the market cap was spiraling higher because of generative AI, Brody. Talk us through why BDO, for example, is now willing to work with Supermicro Computer.
Yeah, it's quite a dramatic episode. Backing up a little bit, Supermicro missed a deadline to file financials back in August. Then their auditor, EY, resigned, saying we're not willing to be associated with these numbers. This is scary stuff. You don't see this too often. And so it was up to the wire here. Supermicro had to find a new auditor to get them in line with NASDAQ rules to avoid delisting. And on the very last day, yesterday evening, they found BDO. And BDO is a fairly major auditor, but it's worth noting they are not one of the big four. They're the big fifth or sixth, depending on who you listen to. But what matters is they are an auditor, and they're willing to, try to help Supermicro get back into compliance, which buys them a couple more months before, another deadline.
February is likely when the document deadline is going to be pushed to for this 10K filing. The risk here is, they're ousted out of the NASDAQ, and therefore liquidity is going to be far more difficult. People will be forced to sell their holdings, right?
Yeah, February, 3 months from now in the news business sounds like forever. In the accounting world, it is, very short, because they essentially have to go back through all of their financials and figure out there was some issue. Maybe it was around just processes. Maybe no restatement is needed. Even in that best case scenario, it's quite tight, right? Let's say that they were delisted. What would happen is a significant amount of their shareholders are passive, meaning it would be automatic selling. And it's possible that they would have to repay some of their bonds early. That's, about 1.7 billion or so. Essentially, Supermicro is going to do everything within its power to avoid that scenario, and its odds just got a whole lot better after yesterday's news.
Meanwhile, it still faces a DOJ probe, we understand, Brody Ford, all across this company. Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York. It is time now for Talking Tech. And first up, shares of Delivery Hero's Middle East unit, Talabat, sold out minutes after its subscriptions opened. The IPO valued Talabat at up to $10.2 billion, and the final price of Talabat's offer will be announced on November the 29th, with shares set to start trading on December the 10th. Plus, Apple is offering Indonesia $100 million in investment as the company hopes to persuade the government in lifting a sales ban on its iPhone 16. That's according to sources. The proposal is an increase of a prior offer of $10 million made last month. Indonesia's Ministry of Industry was not made a final decision on the revised offer. And Sony is exploring a takeover of publisher Kadokawa, maker of the hit game Elden Ring. According to sources, the two companies have held talks with deliberations still ongoing. The purchase would allow Sony access to Kadokawa's expansive library of manga, anime, film, and gaming content. Let's stick with gaming now, because Roblox has announced more protections to its platform for its youngest users, with new parental controls, restrictions on communication, and the content that is accessible, as well as clearer content labels. This is all after Roblox's child safety policies have come under increasing scrutiny in recent months, and following arrests of alleged child abusers using the service. Now, Matt Kaufman, who's Chief Safety Officer at Roblox, I'm pleased to say joins us now to discuss these changes and just go into some of the measures in particular that you think will make a real difference here.
Sure. First, thank you for having me. We've launched three things. The first is new parental controls that make it easier for parents to monitor and manage their kids' accounts, even when they're not sitting next to their kids. We've also updated how our younger users under 13 can communicate on the platform. And finally, we've built in additional protections for our youngest users.
Let's just talk about ultimately defining and working out who is 13 and under. It's a really difficult lift if people aren't going to be always telling the truth. Are you using technology here, or is it really depending on the truth of the user base?
If you're under 13 and you sign up for an account online, we actually cannot ask you for additional information because of privacy reasons. So from a Roblox perspective, we work to make sure that everybody is on the platform is safe, no matter what age they sign up as.
So how, therefore, are you looking to, if you cannot ask, if you cannot get the data and their clarity, is there a fix? Is there something you're working on?
Well, so what we do is we take extraordinary steps to keep everybody safe on the platform. For example, when you're communicating on Roblox, we don't encrypt anything. We monitor all communication, and we have an investigation team that's constantly looking into issues where our systems detect that something may be violative to our process. our policies. And we have a lot of machine learning and AI systems that are running to keep everybody safe.
Yeah,
and really that's part of our, go ahead.
Well, talk through that AI, the machine learning. How sophisticated is it becoming? Because the subtleties of grooming are so hard to pick up on.
That's true. AI is advancing very fast, and we've made significant leaps in the technology. For example, our automated moderation systems for voice communication. Just earlier this year, we open sourced some of the models behind that technology, and they're some of the most popular models in open source today for safety. So we feel that Roblox is really at the leading edge of developing AI to keep people safe on the platform.
Can you give that balance of AI and then the team that does the deeper investigation? Is it that you can ever more focus on technology being the fix here? How big is the team going to remain?
Really, everything is almost like a multi-layered approach. You have AI systems that make initial decisions and act very fast and at super scale. But behind those AIs, you have a team of professional safety experts that are doing all sorts of things. They're the ones who are training the AI. They're also the ones that are handling appeals, because sometimes the AI doesn't get things right. So if somebody says, hey, I feel like it made a mistake, we have our team of professionals who step in to make decisions. And of course, that trains the AI. And then we also have that team of professionals handling the most complicated cases. So for example, we have a team of investigators who are constantly looking at the platform, trying to understand if there are bad actors, and if there are, immediately removing them from the platform, and working with our law enforcement partners to keep the platform safe.
Yeah, focus in on the bad actors side. You've outlined how you're going to be protecting the users, the children, but the people who come on who aren't who they say they are, who are indeed the predators. What are you doing to innovate there?
Sure. So let me step back for a minute and say, Roblox has nearly 90 million users from 190 countries around the world. And these users are enjoying experiences with their friends and with their families. And it's a really important part of their life. There's a very, very small number of people in the world who are they're bad actors. And so we have systems that automatically detect behavioral anomalies to determine when something might be violating our policy. And we try and act as quickly as we can. That notion of acting as quickly as we can actually applies to how people upload content to Roblox. First of all, when you're building a game on Roblox, we review every piece of content that's uploaded to the platform before anybody sees it. And when you're communicating using text on the platform, we actually block out and filter a lot of that communication before it ever transmits to other people if we find that it is violative for our policies.
So are those sorts of changes that you just outlined, are they new? Are they novel? Because very sadly, as you say, there are very few bad actors in a percentage perspective, but raw numbers of at least 24 people being arrested since 2018 because of abusing or abducting victims met through the platform is 24 too many, as I'm sure you agree.
I think anybody, obviously, who comes to any harm on Roblox is one too many. And we take these situations incredibly seriously, and we do everything we can to keep the platform safe. It is our number one priority. When it comes to the bad actors on Roblox, we are constantly innovating. And we've actually this year alone have already had 30 major updates to our safety systems. So the release that we're talking about today and that we announced this week is really about limiting exposure to some of our youngest audiences to content that's more appropriate to teenagers. When we're talking about the really bad actors, we are constantly innovating on that front and constantly updating our systems.
You talk about safety being your number one priority, and there have, of course, been accusations that there was growth that came first over safety. Do you still feel in any way that that's the case, or do you ultimately have to slow down sign-ups in some way to ensure the number one priority is safety?
Our number one priority is safety. I think that's just our first principle. And if you think about it from a company perspective, Roblox was founded, nearly 20 years ago, where the audience was primarily kids in the beginning. And really, since its foundation, protecting the users on the platform has been our first priority. And it's good for our business. It's good for growth. It's obviously good for our users. Everyone at Roblox understands that. Yes, sometimes we slow things down to account for safety issues. For example, when we first start developing new features, we'll sit down with those feature teams and talk about risks associated with a feature and make sure we address those at the very beginning rather than waiting until the very end and trying to fix something. We build safety in from at the beginning.
You're not the only company that in many ways has let a genie out of a bottle here because of those few bad actors. And I'm interested as ultimately how the focus shifts from being one where companies are the ones we turn to fix this, or how much the onus is on the parents, on the children, on the users. Where do you think that balance lies, Matt?
I think companies need to take a proactive stance to keeping their users safe on the platform. Obviously, we want to provide as many systems and controls and insights to parents as possible. But from our perspective, we need to make the assumption that parents aren't always in the room and aren't always involved. And that's okay. Parents are really busy. They're, spread between their jobs and all kinds of different things going on. And we need to play a proactive role. I think when you're talking about like the larger problem that we face, I think it's almost like it's a problem across the internet. And so the other thing that we think a lot about on Roblox is how do we keep people safe on Roblox, knowing that our users also have accounts on other platforms and they have phone numbers and cell phones and things like that. And we do our best to keep people on Roblox. So we try and block people from sharing personal identifiable information. We try and block people from directing users to other platforms because we know that we can keep Roblox safe and we know that we go to great ends to keep the platform safe, but other platforms don't operate at the same standards that we do. So it's very important for us to do what we can to make sure that people stay safe on Roblox while they're there.
Roblox Chief Safety Officer, Matt Kaufman, thanks for your time today on the latest protections being unveiled. Meanwhile, we shift from a particular corporate story over to what's happening in the broader markets right now. We actually want to shine a light on what's happening in crypto because it is continuing to sustain its rally. Bitcoin up to now 92,000. We're off of that key high reached in the previous week, but we're still up a percentage point on the day. MicroStrategy, extraordinary run, more than 400% higher over the last year trading. We're up another 6%. The company's going to be selling yet more convertible debt to be able to buy, you guessed it, yet more Bitcoin. They've just added more than 56,000 already. They have more than $30 billion worth on their balance sheet. We're looking at backed holdings as well. Interesting story that maybe Trump Truth Social might well be purchasing backed, of course, a marketplace for crypto. Coming up, we have Trump Media currently off by 7% on the back of that reporting. Tech firms, meanwhile, are racing to develop AI-powered agents to help improve efficiency across sales industry. One of the leaders in the field is Rox. Company CEO and co-founder Ishan Mukherjee is going to be joining us. This is Bloomberg Technology. There is a wave of startups and bigger companies that are focusing in on developing AI-powered agents, in particular for salespeople, all in an effort to more efficiently complete tasks with minimal human supervision. One of them is Rox, who today announces a $50 million raise. Here with more, Rox CEO and co-founder Ishan Mukherjee. Ishan, first things first, before we get to the exact details of the numbers, is how many companies do you estimate are out there building agents for enterprise?
There's quite a few. You have a growing incumbent kind of market of vendors who are repositioning themselves as AI companies. And then because of the barriers of entry being lowered, there's always early stage companies entering the market.
And yet, Sequoia picks you, General Catalyst picks you. Why? What are you offering that's different that Salesforce isn't already plowing money into, Microsoft isn't doing, or some of the other startups that are in the field?
Yeah, at Rox, we're building AI that focuses on accelerating revenue for the largest enterprises. Caroline, what we're seeing is every business owner across every vertical is blowing out their revenue targets for next year. Some of our customers are doubling their revenue targets, but none of them are doubling their team size. So the interesting thing about sales is it follows the power law. 90% of the revenue in a scaled enterprise comes in through your largest enterprise customers, which is supported by a top 15% of your employees.
Okay.
We have to double the revenue. You have to get more out of like the top 15% of the employees.
Okay, so you're saying with your technology, with your AI agents, you're sort of super powering, augmenting the humans that are currently being hired. But my question remains sort of, why wouldn't someone do that through Microsoft? How can you ensure you continue to build your pipeline of users and indeed with the 50 million that you currently raised be able to tackle that?
To be essential to an enterprise and essential securing and growing their customers, like the core advantage of AI is to be able to deeply couple with the data layer. So at ROX, we built the first enterprise-ready AI agent swarm that's powered by a warehouse-native system of record. So ROX we've seen amazing kind of early adoption because of the power of the data that we aggregate that fuels these agents.
ROX CEO, co-founder Ishan Mukherjee, we appreciate you coming on to talk about the raise and the company. Meanwhile, Huawei's ambitions to create more powerful chips for AI and smartphones has hit some major snags because of US sanctions. This as the Chinese firm is designing its next two Ascend processors. Its answer basically to NVIDIA's dominant accelerators. It's all according to sources who say this means that the firm's marquee chips will be stuck at aging technology until at least 2026. Meanwhile, let's talk about innovation over at NVIDIA. It's teaming up with Google to pursue another technology once, relegated to science fiction, quantum computing. Bloomberg's Ian King has the details. We were just talking about quantum computing with a market analyst yesterday, and here we have a new deal being forged between NVIDIA and Google. What are they going to be doing together to progress us?
Well, this is basically NVIDIA saying, hey, this is another use of our technology, our AI chips and systems and software. And hey, look, there's a really important company called Google that you've heard of that's using this to try to push the whole quantum computing world forward. Early stages, but basically Google is going to be using an NVIDIA supercomputer.
Okay, NVIDIA's supercomputer will then be able to strip out so-called noise, as you say. What exactly adds to the noise? What is it that the innovation we're seeing right here, right now, that can cut that down or indeed understand how it impacts the future of quantum computing?
Yeah, I mean, we're using the phrase quantum computing and everybody throws it around, but it doesn't really exist. There are components, or the early stage components, that are attempts to use quantum mechanics to basically represent information and to replace standard semiconductors. We're at the really early stages of that, and actually deciding what is information and what is just random noise generated by the environment is really difficult. What NVIDIA is saying is, hey, use our technology and you'll be able to develop components more quickly that can do that by simulating that environment.
So NVIDIA wants to ensure that we still think of it going forward past into quantum computing. Google, meanwhile, is in on the act just because of the sheer force of data processing that will be achieved under this, what is currently still in the bounds of fiction.
Yeah, exactly. You said will be achieved, and some people would say that's an inevitable future. Jensen Huang, I believe, said, a couple of decades, maybe more than a decade. Others have said never. So you take your pick. But certainly NVIDIA is definitely covering its bets and, again, trying to push forward this idea that, hey, we have this incredible system for accelerating whatever it is you're working on. Even if it's something that will replace what we do, we can get you there. Use our stuff.
Or the narrative that builds ahead of their earnings in, little more than 24 hours' time. Ian King's going to be all across it. We thank you with the latest on NVIDIA. Later today, SpaceX is slated to launch its gargantuan Starship rocket once again out of South Texas, and it's a key test that is expected to include a guest visit from President-elect Donald Trump. Bloomberg's Lauren Grush joins us right here in New York, I'm lucky enough to say.
Yes.
So, what is it that they're testing? Is it going to be a repeat, the chopstick fan, incredible viewpoint that the whole internet went wild about?
Right, yeah, that stunning booster catch that everyone was shocked over. They're going to try and do that again. And we're probably going to see that happen many, many times. The goal of these tests is to make it so that it's perfect, right? And so they're going to see if they can do it again, perfect that booster catch, as well as launch Starship around the world, and then also bring that back to Earth through the atmosphere and hope that it survives its fiery plunge.
just remind us how difficult this is, just how much bigger a rocket that it currently is compared to what's already been tried?
Right, so Starship is by far the most powerful, the largest rocket that humans have ever developed. I mean, it's the key to what SpaceX was formed for, right? To send humans to deep space like the moon and Mars. It's a behemoth of a vehicle, and it has, dozens of engines at its base. So the fact that they can do this alone is a feat, but really they need to get to a place where they're comfortable with doing this over and over again. I mean, just last week, President Gwen Shotwell said that she anticipates launching Starship up to 400 times over the next 4 years. So this is something that they want to make routine.
400 times to do what exactly? Like, this is where the money and the revenue stream comes in. We just saw a phenomenal valuation for the company. Part of that is the government contracts they can win.
Right. I mean, essentially, Starship is going to replace the vehicles that they're currently using to launch humans and cargo to orbit. That won't happen for a while, but they want to use Starship to send their next generation Starlink satellites into orbit, for instance. The goal is to use this as a lander for NASA's Artemis program to land people on the moon, and then eventually to send humans to Mars someday. So it really is going to be kind of the crux of SpaceX's business plan moving forward.
One which might well be helped by the fact that Elon Musk is so close to the President-elect Trump, who might well be there to view all of this.
Right.
What is the next technological feat that's necessary? Can it even get in this current capacity to somewhere like Mars?
So glad you asked. So as impressive as these test flights are, there's still quite a long way to go. So to get to deep space destinations, for instance, Starship has to refuel in orbit, and that's something that's never really been done at this scale before. So essentially what they'll have to do is launch Starships and then launch multiple back-to-back Starships that will dock in orbit and refuel, kind of like, filling up at the gas tank over and over again. And then once it has enough fuel, then they can go on to the moon and Mars. But that's still a while away, and they still need to perfect this booster catch. They need to make sure that Starship can come back to Earth in one piece. I mean, they were able to do that last time, but we still saw some pieces of it burning away. So, it's still a work in progress, but that's what each of these tests are for, right? It's one step forward into that direction. But yes, it's going to be some time before anyone is launching on this vehicle, let alone going to the moon and Mars.
All eyes around 5 p.m. today Eastern. Lauren Grush, so great to have you here. Thank you. Meanwhile, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tune in tomorrow. We've got a great interview with the Qualcomm CEO, Cristiano Amon, on all things, you guessed it, chips and AI. This is Bloomberg Technology.